JR, what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
Quit my job and buy a one-way plane ticket. You know the story.
Oh, Lord. The one-way ticket story. Yeah. The one-way ticket story.
Yeah.
I got that dish. Dish. I got that dish. I got that dish. That dish.
Hey, y'all. It's Onika.
And JR.
And you are dishing with Dainty Dish. How you doing today, JR?
I am doing swell. You know, I'm back on that 9 to 5, unfortunately, but fortunately at the same time. But, you know, I'm not going to let it kill me. I'm going to let it make me stronger.
Amen.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. First day of the campaign, the Faces of Mental Illness campaign, and it's been quite the interesting experience. And today, we are fortunate enough to have one of the faces with us. Jill Eaton. Jillian, why don't you just say hello?
Hey.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Excited to be here.
That's good.
Meet everyone in person.
I know. And where are you from, Jillian?
I live in Squamish, British Columbia.
So you traveled quite a distance to get here.
A little ways.
A little ways? How's the flight?
Flight was good. Still recovering, a little bit tired. 3:30 a.m. wake up yesterday. Been a couple early days.
Yes, we've had
But I'm good.
Yeah. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, it helps being around people with high energy. Like yourself.
Well, Jillian, we do this thing every second Wednesday of the month called All Kinds of Crazy. It's one of our very favorite segments, and we talk to people in our community and now abroad, not just in the local community. Yeah. Now we've hit BC. We've hit
exciting.
It big.
Nationwide.
Yeah. And we talked to them about their journey, their story. So that's what we want to hear from you today, is about your journey. And we always start with, do you remember the show The Wonder Years?
No.
No, are you too young? Are you too young for The Wonder Years?
I think we only had 2 TV stations out at the island, and there was the local one that's the town one, and then CBC.
CBC, okay.
There wasn't a ton of variety.
Okay, fair enough. Well, The Wonder Years, just, talking about the Wonder Years, your young life, growing up. What was that like for you?
It was good. I had a really good childhood. We moved around quite a bit, from being born in Oakville, Ontario, to Edmonton, back to Newmarket, Ontario, and then finally to Winnipeg, Manitoba. But I always say that I grew up at the cabin because it was the most consistent place. Every summer we were sent out there or taken out there with my parents, and my great-grandparents were there, grandparents. Every time there was a new generation brought in, we built a new cabin. So we grew up the whole family together out on this island. So that's where love of water and adventure, as well as family and kind of a different way of life. You had to know how to maintain things. So...
And
that was pretty amazing.
Just out of curiosity, what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
That's a good question. There's a few things. I've gone to Alaska many times and done expeditions there. I was the world's first to paddle a tandem sea kayak down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon a couple years ago. And then last year, I was the first Canadian to paddle across America, which was a 150-day expedition, 6,500 kilometers paddling. Wow. 23 portages. Sorry, I speak like an American now. This is a long time in the States. Yeah.
That's
and
cool.
Then, of course, the whole life journey in general is always the biggest adventure.
Let's get back to that life journey. So you had a really great, you said, childhood growing up. What was your teen years like?
Teen years were good. They were a little bit more of a struggle. I think that goes for most people. I was competitive in a lot of sports, had a lot of injuries because I went really hard, which kind of resulted in some depression, just out of frustration of not being able to do the things that I loved, whether it be sports or then art as well and photography, as I already found a passion with those things when I was quite young. So I started to get depression probably when I was 15, 16, and saw a therapist for a little bit, which just resulted because I was a teenager in more frustration. The whole, like, you hand me papers to read and I hate reading. I rip those up. You don't know what you're talking about. Do the things I love. F you. And then I did all the things I loved and I became happy again. Like, oh, you were right the whole time. Yeah, but it was still good. It still had the consistency of the cabin, which is kind of my happy place, and family all around. So it was still pretty good. Went to university in Manitoba and went to a private photography school after that. And then eventually moved to British Columbia to get away. Mental side of things wasn't the best in Manitoba for me. I didn't find a lot of happiness there. I felt pretty trapped and wasn't inspiring at all. So it's, my dad took a business trip to Vancouver, and I went along and rented a car and toured up and down from Vancouver to Whistler to Pemberton and back, and completely fell in love with the place, and found a totally different energy there that I was really seeking. Got home and packed up my Jeep, and 2 weeks later I moved to British Columbia, and I'm pretty sure my mom has yet to forgive my dad for that one. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's some anger for that. Yep.
She lost her baby girl.
Yeah. Not knowing anyone, but headed out there, got a live-in nanny job, and then got a photography job like the week later at a dog sledding and snowmobile outfit. So I got to be out in the mountains every single day, which was amazing, and then surrounded by dogs.
I know you have a love of dogs.
I do. Yes, I definitely do. I've always had that, and for wildlife and animals in general. But yeah, that was a pretty amazing experience. Fell in love with the animals and the sports, and and then eventually one of the mushers up there, and then I started a relationship for a while.
Okay, how'd that go?
Yeah, it was good. It was 5.5 years. It started. Well, I mean, I was in love with the person, so in that regard, it was good. It was abusive, though, from basically the start, emotionally and mentally, and then slowly became physical, financial, and basically every aspect of abusive. And I just mathed it for the whole 5.5 years, essentially, and lived this secret life and kind of put all of my passions aside, which I loved the things that I was doing. We started our own dog sled company. Rescued all of our sled dogs, 16 dogs from all over Canada. And I always say, as much as I rescued those dogs from staring down guns, they rescued me more than anyone could explain. Being able to go down to them and them being there and compassionate towards me when I was in the darkest moments was incredible. And it was really what got me through a lot of the time. So that was like most of my 20s was with that whole situation. And after 5.5 years, I eventually, thanks to the help of a stranger, left. I had hidden $300 for quite a while and just grabbed my camera gear and the money and one of my dogs and loaded up my Jeep and drove away and picked up a tent by the side of the road from a lady and lived in a tent for 7 months in the woods.
Can we talk about that for a second? When you told me this over the phone, I was like, you did what? You did what?
Yeah. I didn't really have anything. Well, I didn't have anything. And I needed to be somewhere I felt kind of safe. And the woods always felt like a safe place to me. I was by a beautiful river. I was on somebody's property, so I knew that I could leave the tent set up and leave stuff there. So I had that security, at least. It eventually got to the point where I had to show his photo to people in his vehicle because he was calling like 3 times a day, threatening, and one moment like angry and the next crying, and all of those kind of things as kind of manipulative people like that do. So it eventually became that letting people know on the property like about what was going on. Just so they had my back, and they were incredible. They helped me get through. But it was when I left that I really realized something was kind of wrong with me. Being in the tent, being somewhere that I love so much, and I was just, I think from the adrenaline that had been running for so long, that when I finally was somewhere safe and that went away, then my whole body just had no idea how to comprehend. And I was sick. I was every emotion all the time, up and down. I would uncontrollably unleash anger on friends that I had just made. I'd go to the river with my dog. I'd walk her to the river and stand at this one spot and think about taking my dog's leash and putting it around my neck and jumping in the river. And I never considered myself suicidal. I never wanted to die the whole time. But my mind was just doing every thought possible. It just had no coping. And it was kind of that moment when I had that happen, and I looked at my dog, and she was just sitting there enjoying the beauty in the moment, that I turned and started walking through the woods, and I actually wrote my friend and described the smells and the beauty around me. And then I took myself to counseling from there to try to figure out what was going on with it. And I was diagnosed with PTSD from there. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've talked about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
What was it like receiving that diagnosis? Was it a relief? Was it like, how did you feel about that?
I think that was the most terrifying thing. Going through everything. There's other things to the story, but that added to the PTSD. But that was terrifying because we affiliate PTSD essentially just to the military, to people that go to war, who see the worst things, who have had the worst things done to them. And all I thought walking out of that office was, I haven't gone to war. And it took a long time for me to comprehend, okay, I have been in a war. I've been in a certain type of war. I've been in my own war, and I'm just trying to decompress and figure out what I've been through and trying to compartmentalize it and file it away and deal with it, because now it's all just there and it doesn't know where it's supposed to go in my mind now. Like I said, because I was just basically running on adrenaline and fear for so long that was all that I felt, and that was all I was focused on. And now that I was able to shed that, everything else was just a mess. It was like spaghetti in my mind. Didn't have anywhere to go. Yeah, that was really, really terrifying. So, but once I learned all about that, and started to find tools, like began journaling, and reading a little bit about what I had gone through and others have gone through. And I was given a workbook, When Love Hurts, which was the hardest thing I've ever tried to work through ever, because it asks you to write down details of everything that you've been through, which really does help in the long run because you can file it away. But it's the hardest thing ever to write down things that have either been done to you or that you've done to yourself that you have never admitted really before. Like things that I don't share to people still to this day that I won't admit. You have to write down in this book, and it's the hardest thing, but it really taught me a lot about it, because it then you'll work through it, and then you'll get to statistics and learn, holy cow, like I'm nowhere near being the only person who has gone through this. There are so many people out there, and that helped to motivate me to start to share. First, just letting a friend read a journal entry, and then another friend reading more detail of what I had been through, and then starting to answer questions with friends, to the point where I eventually wrote an article for the Canadian Women's Foundation. And it put pressure on me to share with my family. I asked them, at that time, I told them I wasn't ready to share details, but if they felt they needed to know, then they could ask. So my parents have never asked details of what went on. My brother did ask. He felt he needed to know what had been done. So he does. But so that was a really powerful thing, having that shared. And I have a good story about that afterwards. This article was published about what I had been through and leaving everything behind, my dogs, and being in this abusive relationship and so on, what I just shared. And a couple months after that came out, I had done this big one year anniversary trip across Canada to find myself again, reconnect with all of my passions. And that was when that article was published. So when I got back to Squamish, a couple months later, I was booked to do some headshots for a woman. And she's quite a bit older than me, in her 60s, I think, at the time. and do this lovely session, half hour, taking photos. We have great conversation. We head to her vehicle to get paid, and she's grabbing her checkbook, and she turns to me and she says, I have something to tell you. I read your article in the Canadian Women's Foundation, and I saw this very young woman being so brave and to share her story, but also to have the strength to leave this thing, leave her whole world behind, everything that she knew. And I was in an abusive relationship at the time. I was in Ontario dealing with this horrible place, and I didn't have that strength. And I saw you, and it gave me the courage to leave. And I packed up my stuff and left everything else. I took my dog, and I moved from Ontario, and I moved here and had to find you. And I had to book this photo session to tell you this. And it was like, oh, I'm bawling my eyes out. Like, she's bawling her eyes out.
Oh my
and it's
gosh.
like the most powerful thing. I'm like, I can die tomorrow. I can die any second now, and
You
I will be
touched a life, and
completely.
you've touched so many
I will be
lives.
completely content with my life because I know that this woman had the strength because of something I wrote to leave and get to safety, and now has a beautiful life. She's got a great partner. Her and I go for coffee as much as we can. She's
That's
the
nice.
sweetest. Yeah, she comes to presentations when she can. It's so sweet. Yeah, it's like the most powerful thing. And from there, of course, that has just encouraged me to keep sharing more and more and be more and more open. And that's a big reason for nominating to be a part of this Faces campaign was that.
So let's talk about that. My nomination story is hilarious. So what was yours? What was yours like? What's the tale behind getting nominated?
Well, I nominated myself. I had no fear of that. Yeah. I mean, I talked to a few other people, but people are busy too. And what's the harm? And if you want to share your story, you should have the courage to share your story. And so I just sent in, I just wrote it all up and sent it in and got a phone call from them. I had chatted with some of the other people from Bell Let's Talk prior to this. So I was really, really pushing to be a part of Bell Let's Talk in some way. I have some other friends that are a part of the organization. And I really stand for what they do. So had been trying for quite a while and eventually got on the phone with somebody. They mentioned this Faces campaign and that the nominations would be open soon. So yeah, I just didn't hesitate and immediately sent in a message and video content and photos and everything and shared my story. And then had the phone interview, which was amazing. Which it sounds like most of us had kind of the same experience where, yeah, we were kind of surprised by it and then got off the phone and we're like, I screwed that up horribly. There's no chance. And then sat anxiously for a couple weeks waiting
I stayed
for...
in bed. I stayed in bed for a week. I wasn't living in bed. I was like, I'm not leaving until I get this call. I'm just in bed.
I definitely checked my email like, at every opportunity. My phone, every time my phone rang, is it them? Is it them? Oh, dang it. Come on, guys. They're really torturing us here. You know we all have mental health issues. We all have anxiety. Come on. It's a true test.
True test.
Yeah. And I got the call and was beyond excited to be a part of it.
I would love to talk a little bit also about your expedition.
Yeah.
When you told me that you had kayaked across the United States of America,
Yeah.
I went on a hike a couple weeks ago and I could barely survive. So how did you survive that?
That's a big part of the mental health side of things is going through something, whether it be PTSD or anything like that. You find a strength in yourself to overcome that. And it's the same on an expedition. You learn more about yourself on these expeditions, whether it be physically or mentally, than anything else. And so that's the big motivation for me is I really get in touch with my mental state. You can't, when you're solo on something like that or out in the wilderness, you have to have full belief in yourself or you're not going to survive. You have to trust in yourself. And that can be the hardest thing, especially if you have some sort of mental illness, or if you've gone through something on your expedition, like if you've already failed at something, but you still need to keep going. It can be the hardest thing. And it's the biggest life lesson is to get through that. So it was pretty incredible pushing myself for those 150 days, against currents for the first 2 rivers, up the Columbia River, up the Snake River. We're against the spring flood. So huge currents, higher than normal spring melt off. Dams were wide open. So portages that were normally like a mile long were quadruple, if not more, up to 16 miles. And then having to hike over the portage over the Great Divide. I broke my foot the second day and kept going.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that was 675 kilometer portage, 600 kilometers on a broken foot. And then my feet were too swollen and too blistered and too infected to get my boots on. So the last 3 days I had hitchhiked and set up camp for the other person beforehand. And then took a couple days off because the blisters were already infected. And I was about to go into the second most polluted river in North America, the Missouri River. So it wasn't really a good idea to have open wounds in that water.
For sure.
Well, the broken foot was the least of the concern at that point. Yeah, and you kind of, there's that frustration of like, you've trained really, really hard for this. I train really, really hard at least to do these things. And then your body fails and you still have to like mentally get through it and tell yourself, okay, it's like you have this in front of you. Okay, how are you going to deal with this? How are you going to overcome this? Yeah, you get everything unexpected on an expedition like that, just like life, right? You can plan as much as you want, do as much research as you want, have all the proper gear, but there's always unexpected things that happen. Yeah.
At dinner, you were talking about post-expedition depression. Can you tell the listening audience what that is? Because I'd never heard of that before.
So that's something, it's related to culture shock, I guess you could say. So when you go off on an expedition, you're immersed in that. Your mindset is essentially survival and accomplishment. You have one goal, and you're trying to achieve that. And you're very hyper focused the whole time. And you're tired every day. You use your body a lot the whole time. And your mind is fixated on this goal and where you are. And you also don't have mirrors. You don't have those things. So you don't have to think about judgment, all of that side of things. So it's very relaxed. And then you come back all of a sudden into civilization and you have this huge culture shock where there's mirrors all around. And I'm very self-conscious. I deal with that. That's one of my mental things, like mirrors and seeing myself in that side. So it's really, really struggle. It was a big struggle in that regard, but then also just the amount of stimulus around you. It's just it's sensory overload when you get back. As much as people think like it's so hard to adjust to going and living in the woods, it's so much easier than it is to go from the woods into civilization where there's everything around you, access to everything. There's demand for things. There's expectation, judgment around every corner, even if there isn't, you feel that way. So you get that. And then it's that if you don't have another goal right away, then you kind of feel lost all of a sudden right away. So a lot of adventurers and explorers immediately start planning their next trip just to kind of have something in their mind. So I immediately started planning there's 50 trips rooted out just for something for my mind to do. Even if I know that I'm never going to do some of them, it's like, okay, well, I have that goal at some point. I can do that. Just to give your mind something to do and focus on again. That's still like that. It's kind of hard to describe, I guess, unless you've removed yourself from civilization like that
for a long period of time.
Even for a weekend, just a weekend, if you're not used to it, is big for somebody to go away and not have a mirror and then come back. Like go for a weekend and not have makeup on, and then you come back and immediately you're going to want to put makeup on. And it's like, why do I feel that way? I was completely comfortable out in the woods. And even when I saw people on the expedition, I was completely comfortable not having makeup on. It was fine. It didn't matter. There was no judgment. It didn't matter. I don't know why. It's just, you don't think about it. There's no mirrors and things. I guess because you know that people know that you're on this expedition. So they're expecting you to look dirty and grungy. But as soon as it's kind of a fact. You're in civilization. If you go out dirty and grungy, you totally get judged. Like, is this person homeless? Like, why didn't you shower today? Jill only showered once this week, washed her hair. Her hair looks a little greasy. Like, yeah, but I didn't need to wash my hair every day if I bathed. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. And especially if you didn't finish your goal. The guy ended in Baton Rouge, which is not where I had planned to finish. But for kind of safety reasons and the mental side, I was in a really negative headspace at that point. And for me, it was no longer safe to continue mentally, and just because I didn't have safety gear to continue into the Gulf of Mexico. So it was the right call to stop at that point. But to make that call is the hardest thing, because you feel like you're failing. You feel like you're letting people down, whether it's sponsors or family or whoever, even though in the back of your mind, you know that they want the best for you. It's one of the hardest things to overcome too. So you kind of battle that demon a lot when you make the decision, but afterwards too, if it's the right decision, or if it was the right decision, or if you should hold regret in doing it, kind of thing. So yeah, there's kind of a lot that goes along with that side of it.
Oh, you're looking at me?
Do you have any follow-up
He's
questions?
just so in tune right now.
I was just like into it. I mean, I guess, do you know of any other women that you helped with the Canadian Women's Foundation article? Like, have you ever been contacted by anybody else?
I don't think so. I get a lot of messages and emails through social media. So I'm very, very open about PTSD and my struggles on there, and dealing with abuse and things like that. So I get a lot of encouraging messages from women and men too about the sharing side of things, and that it's helped them in some way, which is pretty amazing and powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just sharing what you've been through can change somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing feeling. You talked about the When Love Hurts booklet that you filled out. And you said it was one of the toughest things to do, to kind of, I guess, acknowledge all the feelings and all the emotions that are involved in your life and such. But today, how do you take that experience and, I guess, create a positive output for now, if that actually makes sense? I don't know if that question made sense.
It makes sense, because
Yeah.
I was going to ask a similar question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's hard.
Who is Jillian today, after everything you've experienced, after everything you've gone through? Like, who is Jillian today?
Right. So I always tell people, I mean, if I hadn't gone through those things, I wouldn't be where I am, who I am now. So I'm very thankful. I also always knew when I was in that situation that I was going to make it out. I don't know what that was. It was kind of a subconscious thing that I always told myself, that I was thankful it was me there, because I knew that I had the strength to survive. Whereas somebody else may not have. So I don't have any regret about doing that or being through that. I don't hold anger towards the people that did things to me at all, in that context. Because I know that they have their illnesses too. People don't do those things to people without having their own battles and demons. That they're not willing to share either. So they're not having that healing. So I also understand that too. And I have a lot of belief in people around me and in myself from overcoming all of those things. I tell a lot of people that nothing is put in front of us that we don't have the strength to overcome. It's just whether we have the belief in ourselves to overcome those things.
That's lovely. I find this lovely.
Oh my god! So
A single tear.
Just one tear, just down the cheek. Lovely. Snort.
Yeah, I know. I'm holding it in.
Everyone that has been on the podcast seems to talk about it takes a team to help them get through their struggles. Can you describe your team?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, to leave, it took the help of a stranger, and that was while I was in that relationship. We had a week that it was just complete hell, and he wasn't even at that point. He hadn't been physical in quite a long time. But my sister-in-law was murdered. We had we lost all of our whole business. So like all of our loans, 60 grand, everything that we put in, we lost. And then we had somebody back home while he's out dealing with the investigation of his sister. We had somebody every day calling and threatening to kill our dogs. So I was dealing with police over in BC too. It was just like complete overload. And I went away to try to do some photography work about a month later, back in Squamish for a week. And I wasn't sleeping. I was just living in complete fear at that point of going home. And I went into a pub and sat down. And there were two gentlemen sitting at the bar too. And a puck slides over to me, and there's a Canucks game on. They're like, oh, yeah, if he scores a goal, you're going to get a free beer, but it's not likely because he's already scored a couple. I'll never forget that. I looked over and started shooting the shit with these two guys, and it turned out the one's the nephew of the other, and that he worked for the same painter I used to work for. That painter was the other guy's best friend, and started this whole chit-chat. And for that week, they took me and treated me like family, and they didn't know me at all. Let me stay on their couch. They would invite me to everything that was going on with their best friends, family, whatever it was. And it was driving back home that I stopped to look at my phone because I'd get in trouble for any message, anything from clients, whatever it was, but I couldn't delete them all. And the first phone number that came up was one of these guys. And I called him, and basically without saying anything, he knew what was going on. And he immediately lined up strangers for me to stay at if I needed out in the town that I was living in. Did everything he could on his end to make sure that I could feel safe. Answered the phone every time I called, even though he's big in business, and he would step out of meetings to answer. He put like an escape route plan together. And he basically helped me leave, and didn't really know me at all. So that was a huge team for me, was basically this stranger. And he was the first person I saw when I got back home, gave me a huge hug. And then just strangers that instantly became friends. I had to start from square one, basically. Anybody that was affiliated with my ex, I lost touch with. I couldn't handle dealing with. I was told that I was a liar by most of them, so I just cut them off. I didn't have any of my own friends at the time throughout that period, so it was just easiest to leave all of that and all those affiliations and start fresh. So it was like rebuilding, not just myself, but my community. And it became the most powerful community. People that had either gone through mental illness as well, or were somehow in that community educating others. It was really fascinating that the energy I was putting out and what I needed came through right when I needed it. I mean, my parents have always been there for me. My family has always been there as well. And the more open you are, I think the more people gravitate towards you. I think you also give off more confidence the more you share too. Mm-hmm. And when you give off confidence and when you're open, it's so not normal that I think people are really intrigued by that. Mm-hmm. Whether it's intimidating too. And it allows other people to open up and share. So made a lot of new friends by sitting at a bar and doing the exact same thing that they did for me. I'm leaning over, "Are you okay? How are you today?" Yeah. To a total stranger that looks like they're kind of sad, and they become great friends now too. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jill, Ian, thank you so very much. Our week has just begun.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just been incredible meeting you, and I will be taking you up on that offer to come to BC and stay on your couch. So
please do. I have yourself. Better than a couch. I have a spare bed and
a
futon.
You got a futon? Oh, girl.
I do. Yeah.
I'll be on your futon.
I got some tents too.
I'll take the futon. Okay. Is there anyone before we sign off that you'd like to give a shout out to?
I love you, parents and family, friends. I don't know.
The community.
Yeah, my community.
Community at large.
And, everyone, all the faces here that are supporting each other this week while we're away from our family and friends. I think that's probably the biggest shout out.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys want to get in touch with Jillian, you could always contact us, or if Jillian is willing, we can put her information in the description.
Sure.
We'll get that information.
Great,
Instagram, get her on Instagram.
Sure.
So we'll make sure we grab that from you. But JR, please tell them how they can reach us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's Monday. Absolutely. You can reach Onika at Dysh, DYSH, at daintydysh.com. That's DAINTYDYSH.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts,
give us a 5. You deserve a 5.
We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you're listening to us on YouTube or any other platform, SoundCloud or your favorite podcast app, we truly appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing. We truly appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much. Jillian, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And sharing your story. Can we link to your article in the Canadian Women's Foundation? Can we link to that?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll throw a link up for that as well.
Yeah.
Just because,
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
I imagine they're going to have our stories on the Faces campaign too.
Yeah.
They'll be all nice, fresh.
So we'll link to that. We'll link to that as well.
There we go.
Because that's what we do here at Technology. We just share information.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's it for me. I have nothing else to say. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and thank you so much, Jillian, for being here once again. Onika, thank you for sharing this time with me. I truly appreciate you a little bit.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Well, that has been the dish of the day. So I hope you guys have yourselves a very, very, very happy hump day.
Oh, that's what she was telling me.
Oh.